This video describes a repeatable process for ontology development in military domains by Lieutenant Colonel Bill Mandrick. After defining ontology, I will describe the return on investment gained through sound ontological methods. I will then describe the activities that make up the repeatable process, to include scoping and defining the domain, creating an iterative and evolving lexicon, creation of the initial ontology, the revisions process, and publishing and sharing the finalized products. So what is ontology anyway? Ontology is both a method and a product of that method. It is the science of what is, of the kinds and structures of objects, properties, events, processes, and relations in every area of reality. It is a discipline that is devoted precisely to the representation of entities as they exist in reality. It is a definitive and exhaustive classification of entities in all spheres of being, and the formulation of robust and shareable descriptions of a given domain. Sound ontological methods will yield a high return on investment to include a clearly defined domain, common controlled vocabularies, shareable representations, increased awareness and understanding, and enhanced reasoning capability. The repeatable process for ontology development consists of various inputs, such as domain descriptions, subject matter expert interviews, and doctrinal definitions, to name just a few. These inputs go into the various activities, which include scoping the domain, creating an iterative lexicon, creation of the initial ontology, revising the ontology, publishing the ontology. These activities will result in various outputs as shown here. These outputs will be posted to a shared repository where stakeholders can review and make comments. Scoping and defining a domain starts with the identification and surveying of authoritative references. Joint doctrinal publications are such authoritative references. These publications contain definitions, descriptions, and relations for the entities and events that make up military domains. These are the written expression of subject matter expertise for a given military domain. Service-level doctrinal publications are also the written expression of subject matter expertise. These publications give mereological descriptions for the entities and events that make up various domains. Furthermore, joint and service-level doctrinal publications provide the common lexicon shared by warfighters at the tactical, operational, and strategic levels of war. It is this common lexicon that facilitates unity of effort and development of the common operational picture. One of the primary contributions of a sound ontology is its provision of a common lexicon. Subject matter experts are those persons who are formally trained in some discipline and who have forged their knowledge in training events and real-world operations. In many cases, these are the people who will go on to teach and train others, and in some cases, they will become doctrine writers themselves. Often, a required domain definition will be available in one or more of the doctrinal publications. Here we see the definition for the joint intelligence preparation of the operational environment process. This would be the starting point for such a domain ontology. As will be shown in what follows, a definition such as this one would be refined and decomposed into its constituent elements. One method for establishing metrics, or measures of effectiveness, for a domain ontology is to play 20 questions at the beginning of the process. For enterprise ontologies, these questions fall into 5 basic categories: general questions about the domain, questions specific to the organizations and agents involved in the domain, questions specific to the processes they are involved in, questions specific to the products or outputs of these processes, and questions specific to the purposes or reasons for each of these elements. The ontology's coverage of these questions will be one of the primary metrics to be assessed later in the revisions process. Building up a domain lexicon starts by decomposing the baseline definitions. Here we see the definition for the joint operations planning process. This doctrinal definition can be decomposed into the following 15 elements. All of these elements are contained within the above definition. Each of these terms are candidates for inclusion in the joint operation planning process ontology. If it is determined that the candidate term is needed, then it must be defined and related to the other elements of the ontology. To avoid creating stovepiped or idiosyncratic lexicon, always use two-part genus-species definitions. Always start a definition by referring to the parent class of the thing being defined. Then add the differentia, or that which distinguishes the thing being defined, from all other things in the parent class. Examples will follow shortly. When creating definitions, it is also critical to distinguish between types and roles. As shown here, a building is a type of facility. It can be in various roles such as a house, a hospital, mosque, a school, or even a target role. Let's consider an example where someone might mistakenly define something by a role it could be in. Commonly available fuel is sometimes used in the construction of an improvised explosive device. However, it would be incorrect to define fuel as a weapon enhancement for an improvised explosive device. Rather, fuel should be defined as combustible matter used to maintain fire in order to create heat or power. Notice that these other examples of proper definitions also have the same basic genus-species structure. With the domain lexicon in hand, we can now start to create the first version of the domain ontology. Protégé and Top-Braid Composer are two tools used for constructing domain models and other semantic applications. There are various training options available to become proficient with these two tools. At this point in the process, the terms that make up the lexicon can be categorized in a hierarchical structure. The basic formal ontology guides this process by dividing reality into the most basic categories. Continuants are those things that exist in time, such as physical objects, properties, organizations, and even information content entities, such as reports, plans, or analyses. Occurrence are those things that unfold through time as processes, such as military engagements, biological processes, and weather events, just to name a few. Similarly, the universal core semantic layer divides the world into types of entities and types of events. The terms that make up the domain lexicon extend from these categories in the universal core semantic layer. The ontology development process is more than identifying, defining, and categorizing the entities and events that make up a domain. An accurate and meaningful ontology will also relate the entities and events so that users will be able to make inferences about the domain. Here we see a sample of some standardized relations used in the repeatable process. A common upper ontology contains the most basic categories of reality. Domain ontologies become more specific as they extend from the common upper ontology. The level of detail, known as granularity, can become very specialized, right down to the smallest constituent elements of an entity or event. Most importantly, this allows the subject matter expert and other stakeholders to visualize the relations between the entities and events that make up the domain in question. An accurate ontology will properly define a truck, for example, as a vehicle, which can be in various roles, to include IED transport role, personnel transport, a weapons platform, or even an ambulance. A truck will have numerous properties such as speed, course, and location, just to name a few. And we can describe these properties in greater detail. We can also represent the ways that an entity or event is named, indicated, or marked. It is critical that the subject matter experts assist in the revisions process, reviewing all of the products. The ontology development team should prepare briefings for the subject matter experts that focus upon the content of the ontology, as well as its coverage of the 20 critical questions identified earlier in the process. It is a best practice to create a shared repository early in the development process. The shared repository is where all of the products or outputs will be posted. Furthermore, it will also facilitate interaction between the domain stakeholders. Governance mechanisms should also be posted on the shared repository. Governance consists of the mechanisms that ensure that participants follow pre-established processes and policies. Proper governance implements systems to monitor and record what is going on, takes steps to ensure compliance with agreed policies, and provides for corrective actions in cases where they are needed. In conclusion, the repeatable process for ontology development will clearly define a domain, producing accurate domain representations and models, resulting in a controlled vocabulary and shared lexicon, which will facilitate interoperable semantics, as well as increased awareness and a shared understanding of the domain, with the ultimate goal of enhanced reasoning about the domain. If you'd like to learn more about military ontology, see my Warfighter Ontology video on YouTube. For more information on ontology in general, start with these links. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Please send any questions or comments to Lieutenant Colonel Bill Mandrick at the listed email address.